The global nature of the flood is given in the biblical text, and it's quite clear, especially going to the original terms that are used. The term for the flood itself is Mabul.
The unique Hebrew word, Mabul, it's used only one other place in the Old Testament. That is in Psalm 29, verse 10, where it says that God sat as king at the flood.
It's a very unique term that sets this account apart from other types of flood.
So this was a unique flood. First, we could talk about the flood itself, the purpose of the flood. Contrary to what many think, it was not simply to destroy sinful man, but also, Genesis 6 tells us, to destroy all the land animals and birds, not in the ark with Noah, and to destroy the surface of the earth. And only a global flood would accomplish that purpose. Then we can talk about the ark. The purpose of the ark was not to save a few animals so Noah could start a farm after the flood. It was, as Genesis 7:3 says, to keep offspring alive on the face of all the earth. And then we have the repetition of universal terms.
Everything that is under the whole heaven, under the whole earth, everything in which is the breath of life.
Those words appear 60 times in Genesis 6. All, every, under heaven. And when you have a repetition of those words, that is emphatic. Secondly, we have the duration of the flood, 370 days.
Why such an extensive flood if it was only local? I mean, why that duration of the flood? Why it takes so long for it to recede and dry up?
There's no way a local flood could last that long. We have the depth of the flood. It covered all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens. And since water seeks a level plain, it would have to be a global flood.
When the scripture says that the waters rose to about 24 feet above the mountains, even if you give the idea that the mountains were not as high as they are now, they were upthrust after the flood, you still have water only rising to its own level. If we had a local flood, then obviously there's no need to build an ark.
If the flood was local in the Middle East, the ark was totally unnecessary. The animals didn't need to go in there. And he could have told Noah and his family to go on a vacation to Europe or Egypt.
Noah and his family could have walked to a safer place. And then why an ark at all? Why such a large ark? Why all the animals? Why the birds? The birds could fly away. Animals, there are animals in other places after all, if it's a local flood. Just this whole idea of everything included in the ark, two of each kind, means you were trying to preserve all of life at that point.
Only a global flood fits the purpose of the ark. Then we could talk about the volume. It was way too big if it was just a local flood.
You also have the very theological concept that if you had men elsewhere who were not part of the judgment of the flood, then the whole idea of a judgment on mankind for corruption of the earth would make no sense whatsoever. God says, I've seen the wickedness of man that's great on the earth, not just in one local place, but on the earth. When we come to the New Testament, you have a passage like 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. It compares a flood that destroyed the world that was with a future judgment on a coming world, or the world that now is. If you had a local judgment in the past, you'd have to have a local judgment in the future. But of course, this is the second coming of Jesus Christ to judge his world, and it has to be universal.
Well, if the flood was just a local event, then what do you think? Maybe when Jesus returns, just a local event? No, it's going to be a worldwide judgment as well.
And I would add one last thing, and that is, we can't find the Garden of Eden. People look at the description of the geography where the Garden of Eden was in Genesis 2. The reason we can't find the Garden of Eden is because the pre-flood world was completely destroyed. It is now buried under thousands of feet of sedimentary deposits. So the flood was not a local flood.